Okay, so get this, right? We're diving deep into John Rawls today.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about justice. But not just any kind of justice.
Right.
It's this whole justice is fairness thing.
Yeah. Justice is fairness.
Our listeners sent in a ton on this guy, Rawls.
It's a big one.
So we got to ask,
Yeah.
when I first heard justice is fairness, I thought, isn't that like the whole point?
It seems kind of obvious,
Right, but Rawls, he's doing something way more interesting here.
Oh, absolutely. Rawls, he takes us deeper, way deeper.
So hit us with it. What's the core idea?
Rawls, he asks this radical question, like, imagine if you had no idea who you'd be in society.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
No idea if you're rich, poor, talented, born into struggle. What would you think was fair then?
Whoa. It's like hitting the reset button on life.
Exactly. That's the original position. Like you're behind this veil of ignorance.
Okay, so you're not just feeling bad for someone less fortunate. You're saying, that could be me.
Right. If you don't know what hand you'll be dealt, fairness, it's not just nice. It's the only rational choice.
Whoa. My brain's doing backflips.
It's a mind bender.
So how do we take this trippy thought experiment back to reality? How do we actually build a just society, not just dream about it?
That's where his principles of justice come in.
All right, break it down for us.
So first up, the equal liberty principle. Basically, everyone gets the same basic freedoms.
Okay, so like freedom of speech, right to vote, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Think of them as non-negotiables in a just society. You can't have justice without those.
Makes sense to me.
But then it gets even more interesting.
Hit me with it.
The difference principle.
Ah, this is where things get real, right? Not everyone's born on a level playing field.
100%. Rawls gets that inequality exists. But here's the kicker. Those inequalities, they're only okay if they help the least advantaged in society.
So not about everyone having the exact same amount, but about making sure that the differences actually help lift everyone up.
Exactly. It's about making sure the system works for everyone, not just a select few.
Give me an example. How does this play out in the real world?
Think about progressive taxation.
Okay.
If I might be the one who needs those social programs, it's in my best interest to make sure they're funded.
And if I'm the one paying more in taxes,
You're contributing to a system that benefits everyone.
it's like a cosmic insurance policy.
Exactly. You're protecting yourself, in a way, from ending up on the losing end of the system.
Mind blown. So we've got these two principles, equal liberty and this difference principle, but it feels like a tightrope walk.
Yeah, balancing act is a great way to put it. You've got to make sure everyone has those basic freedoms, but also make sure the system isn't leaving people behind.
Right. You can't just have freedom without fairness and vice versa.
And that's Rawls' whole thing, right? Trying to find that balance.
But of course, not everyone's going to agree with this.
Oh, for sure. Rawls has his critics, and they make some interesting points.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going next. I mean, just thinking about it for myself, it's kind of unsettling.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like, am I really willing to make that gamble?
Right. If you knew not of it, you'd be at the top. Maybe you'd choose differently.
It really makes you examine your own sense of fairness.
It's like holding a mirror up to your own values.
Speaking of which, let's talk about some of those counter-arguments to Rawls,
Oh, yeah. There are some good ones.
especially from the libertarian side of things.
Right, like individual liberty, limited government, that whole thing.
Exactly.
Right.
So how would a libertarian respond to this difference principle?
Well, someone like Nozick,
Yeah, Nozick.
he'd say, hold on, forcing the more advantaged to give up their stuff.
Even if it's for the greater good.
Even then, they'd say it violates property rights.
Right, because it's like, hey, I earned this, it's mine.
Exactly. They'd argue it should be a choice, not a government mandate.
So more about voluntary charity, less about wealth redistribution.
That's the gist of it. They might say, help the less fortunate, absolutely, but on my own terms.
It's that classic tension, isn't it? Individual freedom versus collective good.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and Rawls is right there in the middle of it.
Definitely. Okay, so we've got the libertarian critique,
Right.
but you mentioned another group that pushes back on Rawls, the communitarians.
Yes, communitarians, they bring a whole other angle to the table.
So what's their beef with justice is fairness?
They'd say Rawls is too focused on the individual.
Too focused on the guy behind the veil, you think?
Exactly. Communitarians would say, hey, we're not just isolated beings making decisions in a vacuum.
Right, we're part of families, communities, cultures.
And those things, they shape our values, right?
Uh,
Including our sense of justice.
so it's not just about some abstract principle, but about the actual lived experiences of being part of a community.
Exactly. They'd say our understanding of fairness, it comes from our shared history, traditions.
So ignoring that shared context, It gives you an incomplete picture of justice.
That's the argument. Sandel, for example, he says our identities are woven into our communities.
So it's like you can't just logic your way into justice. You have to factor in the stories, the struggles, the values that a community holds dear.
It's about understanding justice as a lived experience, not just a philosophical concept.
Okay, so we've got libertarians on one side, communitarians on the other, and Rawls is trying to find some middle ground.
He's trying to bridge that gap between individual rights and social responsibility. And it's a conversation that's more relevant than ever today.
It feels like we're living in that tension, trying to figure out how to balance those things in a world that's increasingly complex and divided.
Absolutely. And Rawls, he was thinking about this stuff decades ago.
He was ahead of his time.
In a lot of ways, yeah. And it's in his later work where he really digs into this question of how to build a just society when people have such different moral and philosophical starting points.
Right, because if we can't even agree on what good looks like,
Then how do you even begin to have a conversation about justice?
it's like we're all speaking different moral languages. It's like, how do you even build a bridge when you're standing on completely different islands?
Well, Rawls, he actually had some thoughts on this.
Okay, lay it on me.
He called it overlapping consensus.
Overlapping consensus. So is he saying, like, find the things everyone agrees on, even if they agree for different reasons?
You got it. It's not about erasing our differences.
Right.
It's about finding those areas of overlap, those shared principles that can bring us together.
So we can at least agree on the rules of the game, even if we're playing different games.
Exactly. Like, we might disagree on the ultimate goal of society,
Okay.
but can we agree that everyone deserves basic rights? That a just system should take care of everyone, not just a select few?
So those become our shared starting points, our common ground.
Exactly. It's like we're drawing a circle around these shared values, and even if our circles come from different places, that overlap, that's where we find our consensus.
I love that. It's so practical. And it feels really relevant right now with all the division in the world.
It is. Think about it. Climate change, economic inequality, political polarization.
Yeah.
These are huge EE issues,
Massive.
and we need to work together to solve them.
No one's disagreeing with that.
Right. And sure, we might disagree about the how, the what, the when,
Of course.
but if we can at least agree on some basic principles like fairness, sustainability, that everyone's life matters.
Okay. Yeah, those are pretty universal.
Exactly. That gives us a foundation to build on.
It's like that saying, I disagree with what you say, but I'll defend your right to say it.
Exactly. You can disagree with someone but still respect their right to have their own beliefs.
And that feels like it's in short supply these days.
Yeah.
Just being able to disagree without everything falling apart.
I hear you. And Rawls, he understood this. He knew that reasoned debate, finding common ground,
Even when it's hard.
especially when it's hard, that's the cornerstone of a just and functioning democracy.
It's a powerful idea. And honestly, it gives me a bit of hope.
Me too. Because it reminds us that even when things feel impossible, even when it feels like we have nothing in common.
There's still a way to find that connection.
Exactly. There's still a way to bridge those divides and work towards a more just future.
Well, that's a great note to end on, don't you think?
I think so. It's a reminder that this stuff matters, that these ideas, these principles, they have real-world implications.
Absolutely. So for our listeners, think about this. What does justice as fairness actually look like in your own life, in your community, in the world you want to live in?
Keep those conversations going because Rawls was right. A just society, it's not a finish line. It's a journey we're all on together.
Beautifully said. And that's a wrap on another deep dive. Catch you all on the next one.